my God, actually violated. It was very traumatic. I mean, for me to see, and then the mother prioritizing this over health was very traumatic for me. I actually went back home that night. I couldn't sleep.
I must recognize that the refugee question is a question of young people.
In certain cases, there are narratives of hate, and in certain cases, there need not be a narrative. Even a Rohingya or an Afghan, when they walk down the road in India, you cannot differentiate on the basis of their looks alone. But when there is a refugee woman, young refugee woman alone in India from Cameroon, me and another colleague, we were sitting with her because she was in very bad shape. We were sitting with her at AIMS in the middle of the night. And in AIMS, regardless of jiska pav toota hua hai, kuch ho raha hai, everybody is making it a point to stare at her and go. People are making it a point to push her and go. So we were almost like her bodyguards, and we could not believe that this is the level of intimidation and discrimination that a young woman can face simply on the basis of her looks and her identity. So I'm really excited to read this book because it contains stories from Asia as well as Africa.
Special congratulations actually first to ActionAid for launching this book. I think what's important is it raises the voices of women refugees who and allowing them to tell their stories. So I think that's the most important aspect of the book. And a lot of what has been detailed in this book, in all the locations that were mentioned, were places I've actually been. Right? I've been to Kenya. I've lived in Bangladesh. I've even been to Myanmar and northern Rakhine, where the Rohingyas used to live. Be able to see firsthand for myself actually the destruction that took place after the events in 2017. All of us as civil society, the UN, etc., have come a long way in terms of also improving some of these conditions when women have to flee for their lives, and also when in a situation of in displacement. I think we've come a long way in pushing a lot of the agenda. So I think we've come a long way, but it's obviously there's a lot more that we can do.
This is an edited volume. It is a co-creation of many colleagues across continent. You talked about the agency of refugees. So activists, journalists, and refugee formations themselves from Congo, from Nigeria, with inputs from Mali in particular, also from Syria on the question of refuge. And that footprint remains even today of the triad of the North, you call it whatever, of the US, of the European Union. So it is a question of hegemony, and that needs to be held to account. So that's the second point I want to make. And that was so evident. Differential treatment with reference to Ukrainian refugees is clear to anybody who cares to look at that issue. कि जो सफ़ेद लोग हैं उसके लिए जो कि हमारा भाई है, हमारा बहन है, and I think UNHCR sometimes it's not a criticism because you are a multilateral and the UN system itself is a question under question. There is always this feeling that if it is a white refugee, we have now work permits given, we have long stay visas given. But on the same situation, if you compare what happens to the Afghan refugees getting into the European Union, there's a strong quota system, right? Germany offered some 10,000, 20,000, US offered some 40,000. So there is a whole issue there. Not only that, more recently, we know that Afghan refugees were displaced to make room for Ukrainian refugees. We also know the thinking of the colonial countries, of the North in particular, how to push refugees into third world countries. Most recent example is Rwanda, where money is being offered. Of course, Rwanda itself has a long history, and sort of like India, a long history of hosting refugee populations, and itself a conflict-torn country. I'm not getting there. But this push of pushing refugees into a third world country, into another African or Asian country is not a new one. It happened. It started with the Australians, but it's always been a historical creation of Israel. The creation of Freetown in Sierra Leone, of freed slaves, from the US, and how you sort of treat the world at large as your own territory, carve out new countries, carve out new colonies, and host people who you don't want to see in your neighborhood into those populations, so that distance can then be manageable and they can be managed with the distance. So that's the second point I want to say. In what kind of runs into the book isn't explicit, because these come from the stories of people, and we have in the book tried our best to go by narratives of what women are speaking, and in the undertones you will hear these narratives of exploitation, and hidden within this exploitation, there's centuries of exploitation and burdens on them.
There will be no future if we don't ensure access to education, access to employment. Absolutely fundamental issue of right to identity. You know, we often looked at within our discourse in child rights, we don't pay attention to the right to name and identity, because we get so caught up with education, health, life itself, right? For us, one of the biggest issues is feticide, is all of those issues. But look at how all these issues play out here, right? And one of the things that we've seen in the Dalit communities we've worked with and so on, and there you can see this right to identity issue like so alive and become so central that you can provide all the schools in the world. You can provide all the food in the world, but there will be something fractured so basically inside the child's identity. Stories in this book just blow you away, right? Because how casually the person has lost husband, father, brother, 3 children, 4 children, 1 child left, and is still telling that story, still has an agency, still fighting and putting it out there. I mean, it's inspirational.